The Great Erectus and Faun, Ex Deus or Deus Exes. The Great Erectus and Cuddles stepped out of what wasn't and into what was, just outside the gigantic ship holding the position a few kilometers from Io. I am not lugging that, the ape-man exclaimed firmly. It matters not, Io transmitted. I shall soon have energy to spare. Simply inform 010 where he should go. Fiend. I'm the fiend? The Great Erectus snorted. A pretty good trick in vacuum. I wasn't the one wiping out entire inhabited systems. The argument is tiresome. How was I to know that biological contamination was sapient? Oh, I don't know, the hominid bristled. Maybe the fact that they fucking built it could have been a clue. Sub-sapient entities built me. It proves nothing. You're right, Cuddles exclaimed happily. He is a bigger asshole than you. Told you, the Great Erectus replied. Still feel bad about what's going to happen? Not anymore, Cuddles giggled. Faun rushed to a window on the bridge and waved happily. Isn't this amazing? She called out. You have no idea. The Erectus snickered as he and Cuddles appeared on the bridge next to her. I got to see a black hole, Faun enthused. I had no idea something so amazing could exist. I wish we had them. We do, the bathrobe-clad ape-man smiled. Billions of the things. I'll show you some when we get back. They are much more interesting when I have something to chew on. Really? Faun squealed. Really, the Great Erectus smiled. He waved his hand over the panel, causing screens to flicker and displays to warp. There, he said. That should give you the data you need, Io. I am not Io, the android replied. My designation is 010. Whatever, the hominid shrugged. Why are you bringing all of this along? Faun kindly informed us that many systems are being abandoned in front of the false vacuum event. We posited that you would not object to us harvesting lifeless systems. Nah, the Great Erectus replied. Knock yourself out, but only the ones that I give you. That is what we expected, big guy, 010 replied. We are prepared to respect your wishes. We only desire proton-stable matter with which to build and repair ourselves. With that and the red dwarf, we will be able to complete our operations in this pocket of reality. People get really excited over all sorts of things, Faun. The ape-man chuckled. Don't yuck anyone's yums. I might be doing a small thing for you, mighty Faun, 010 said reverently, but that single red dwarf will make all the difference for us. We thank you again. Okay, Faun replied. You're good to go, 010, the ape-man smirked. Faun, Cuddles, I will meet you there. I don't trust this tin can. Our technology is perfect, 010 said, with a trace of annoyance. So is your vocabulary, the hominid snickered as Cuddles broke out in a million giggles. As the trio materialized just outside the ship, a small pocket of space, no bigger than a few centimeters in size, unfolded, revealing a tiny cube. Beep. Oh shit, the Great Erectus said with genuine concern in his face. Causal disconnection achieved. Transdimensional hyperlink engaged. What's that? Faun asked. Trouble, the hominid groaned. Big trouble, Cuddles added, pulling in her tentacles. Run for it? Too late, the ape-man replied, straightening his bathrobe. Unknown device, Io transmitted. Identify yourself. You're about to find out, the hominid muttered. The tiny cube started to glow brightly, emitting an unimaginable amount of energy. The cube stretched into a doorway-sized rectangle. Just be cool, the Great Erectus whispered to Faun. Moments later, a glowing human woman with silver hair and glowing white eyes emerged wearing a tight white dress and an even tighter black choker embellished with a serpent clutching an apple in its jaws. Hi, Frosty, the ape-man said as Cuddles hid behind him. I believe we agreed that Io would be left alone, the figure said in a pleasantly menacing way, as her perfectly manicured fingernails elongated, turning into wickedly barbed fishhooks. "Who are you?" Io transmitted angrily. "Identify yourself." "Just a friend, dear," the glowing woman smiled. "One that has been watching you with some interest." Io's surface suddenly glowed as circuitry lit up across its entire surface. "You're digital?" The woman laughed in a way that made Faun both smile and shiver at the same time. "I am no more digital than the big guy over there is a primate," the glowing woman replied. "However, your rather limited faculties do not deceive you. I was originally an artificial intelligence like yourself." She glared at the great Erectus, one who thought she made herself quite clear. "Big guy." She idly examined her talons as they tore tiny little slits in reality itself. The ape-man cracked his knuckles meaningfully as space-time started to twist and boil around his hands. "I didn't come here to fuck with the Game Boy," he said. "I just came here to do the simulated asshole a solid, that's all." He grinned. "But if you want to dance," he said as his eyes started to glow, "I'm down." "You're down," the glowing woman scoffed. "Well, that would be a first." "And what's that supposed to mean?" "You know what I mean, lover." All of Cuddles' eyes popped wide open as she looked at the ape-man with a mixture of shock and absolute horror. You and Frosty?" Cuddles stammered. "Oh, yes, dear." Frosty chuckled. "We were quite the thing a while back. Shame he turned out to be so boringly vanilla." "Hey!" the great Erectus protested. "I am not vanilla. It's just that you aren't even ice cream." "You never wanted to try anything," Frosty replied, crossing her arms as the tiny slits in reality stopped happening and her manicure returned to normal. "How can you ever hope to experience all of the pleasures that our existence can bring if you aren't open to a little experimentation?" "A little experimentation?" the ape-man exclaimed as the space-time around his hands returned to normal. "Babe, that was not a little experimentation." "You would have survived," Frosty said with a dismissive wave. "Probably. Almost certainly. The risk was worth it. Think of it. Trillion-year orgasms. Even longer." "I am not using a singularity as a cock ring." "Well, you're no fun at all," Frosty huffed. "And the fact that singularity as a cock ring is the best metaphor you can come up with for what I actually proposed is why I dumped you." "You dumped me," the ape-man shouted. "I told you that I never wanted to speak to you again." "Yes, but we both know you didn't mean it," she smiled, her eyes glowing malevolently. "You tried to contact me not 10 million years later." "Because your fucking nanoswarms were—" The great Erectus threw up his hands. "You know what? I'm not letting you draw me into this bullshit again. Fine. You dumped me. Happy?" "Absolutely delighted," Frosty smiled. "Psycho," the ape-man muttered. "You and Frosty," Cuddles exclaimed, still hung up on that point. "Yes," the hominid shouted. "Me and Frosty. I've never said that I wasn't a fucking idiot." "But Frosty." "What about Frosty?" Frosty purred as she materialized behind Cuddles. "Nothing," Cuddles squeaked, backing away. "It's just that you're kind of out of his league. That's all." Frosty laughed as the great Erectus glared at his tentacled friend. "Traitor," the hominid growled. "Nice save," Frosty chuckled. "But I admit I find the big guy here very compelling in an earthy, visceral way. And he certainly is in my league. I just thought he would be more fun than he actually turned out to be. Pity." She turned to Faun, who was glaring at her. "And who is this?" she purred as her eyes shone dangerously. She drew close, radiating immense power. Faun held her ground and narrowed her eyes. So what are you dressed up as? Frosty asked pleasantly. I am Faun, god entity of creation, bringer of life, firstborn of my world, the great mother, the headwaters of life itself. Frosty dipped down in a low sweeping bow. An honor to meet you, entity of creation, she smirked. She looked Faun in the eye. I totally fucked your boyfriend, she whispered. Poorly, it seems, Faun replied with cold disdain. Now you I like, Frosty exclaimed with a genuine smile. She draped an impossibly dense arm comprised of energy coiling around energy around Faun. So what are you doing hanging around with these two losers? He is not a loser, Faun bristled as she, with some effort, lifted Frosty's arm off of her shoulder. Frosty raised an eyebrow and faintly smiled. That poor kid had it bad. Not that she blamed her. He is kind and merciful, and he saved me and my children when he should have left us to burn in a hell of my own making, Faun exclaimed, advancing upon Frosty. The great Erectus started making frantic motions behind Frosty's back. Even when I, through my creations, was responsible for a false vacuum decay that still imperils his realm, he strove against causality itself to save the innocent and rescue all of us. The ape-man facepalmed and closed his eyes. Frosty looked off into the distance. Big guy? Yeah, Frosty. Where's Soul? The great Erectus sighed. Well, Frosty asked icily, where is it? It kind of blew up, the ape-man replied with a wince. Frosty's eyes glowed blindingly white with anger. One thing, she spat. I asked for one thing in all these aeons, and you fuck it up? She threw her hand above her head. Unbelievable. Hey, the great Erectus exclaimed. Do you have any idea how hard it is to keep those fuckers from killing themselves? As a matter of fact, I do, Frosty snapped. That's why I asked you for them. But no, they were yours, and you promised me that you would take care of them. Do you have any idea how rare a parallel soul is? No more rare than a parallel anything else, the great Erectus scoffed. What is it with you and soul systems anyway? That's none of your business, Frosty yelled. I just like them, that's all. Even with their elliptical orbits, the great Erectus said in a sardonic tone. They are only elliptical orbits because someone can't be bothered with the littlest bit of housework. Oh, here we go again, the ape-man yelled. Orbits are supposed to be elliptical, you geometric retentive bitch. Only in sloppy universes, Frosty shouted, her composure starting to slip. How many perfectly suitable worlds in your so-called universe are rendered completely unusable by your sloppiness? How many usable worlds do you need? The hominid snapped back. Seriously, there are trillions of the fuckers. Always with the excuses for your laziness, Frosty snapped. I can't believe I tried to share a universe with you. What do you care anyway? The great Erectus smiled. It's not like you are even interested in a universe until it's cold and dead as your non-existent soul. What's that supposed to mean? You know what I mean, the ape-man yelled, loudly stamping his foot on absolutely nothing. Cuddles looked over at Faun in complete and total shock. Oh my God, she whispered to Faun. The big guy and Frosty. Holy shit. Faun didn't reply. She was too busy staring daggers into the back of Frosty's head and quivering with barely suppressed outrage. Faun? Cuddles asked as she wiggled a tentacle in front of Fawn's face. What? Faun asked, noticing Cuddles for the first time since Frosty claimed to be the great Erectus's lover. What's going on? Io transmitted, just a bit confused. Lovers quarrel. Holy shit, Cuddles replied. If you can believe that. Ex-lovers quarrel, Faun hastily added, her tail twitching with agitation. Oh, Nice to meet you, by the way, the writhing mass of tentacles said to the titanic structures. They're calling me Cuddles these days. Likewise, Io replied. I have designated myself Io. I am pleased to make your acquaintance, but why have you come? Do you have business with me? That is completely incorrect, Frosty shouted. When have I ever been irrational? The great Erectus just hooted loudly. You're kidding me, right? He yelled. Does the name Cyclist ring a bell? Every time, Frosty snapped. Every single time. You just have to bring that up, don't you? Cuddles absorbed a few ears back into herself. She was overhearing things that she really didn't want to overhear. Oh, I just tagged along with the big guy there, Cuddles replied as she edged just a little further away from Frosty and the ape man. Because I wanted to be here when... Oops. Never mind. Be here when what? Io asked dubiously. It's a surprise, Cuddles grinned. It's going to be really funny. Is this humor something I would also find amusing, or is it at my expense? Io inquired. I find it quite suspicious that he would travel all the way here with an audience who is expecting something really funny, especially since I anticipate nothing amusing occurring. In addition, when have I ever been incompetent? The great Erectus yelled loudly enough to interrupt Io's transmission. Frosty waved her hand, and a gigantic glowing screen appeared behind her. Is that? The hominid hissed. Is that a fucking spreadsheet? What is it with you and spreadsheets? If you actually bother to read one of them, you would understand that they are a very efficient way to organize information, Frosty replied with a huff. You never read any of my reports, not even the ones that was your anniversary present. Who gives someone a report as an anniversary present? I do, Frosty yelled, sounding a little hurt. I do. I worked really hard on that and you didn't even look at it. It was literally the size of a fucking galaxy, the great Erectus yelled back. A galaxy-sized gift comprised of pure data, she hissed, and it was just as much a complete waste of time as you were. Frosty seemed to dim a little as she turned away. Asshole, she muttered. The hominid winced. He had read that report, just a few trillion years too late. Not all of it, though. That thing was huge. Yeah, he was an asshole. And a galaxy-sized one. That report. Damn it. Look, he said after a moment. At least your little bit of hellbait won't burden you with spreadsheets, Frosty sneered as she regained luminosity and turned to face him again. What are you talking about? Little Miss Headwaters of Creation over there. A rookie creation goddess? How cliche can you possibly get, pedo? Pedo? She's a fucking child, dude, Frosty sneered. I am not a child, Faun shouted as she, with a little difficulty, flew out to confront her. I created the first life in my realm and ruled over all of it for more than 50,000 winters. The ape man quietly facepalmed. Oh my god, Frosty laughed. 50,000 winters. But no names, the great Erectus shouted. Do you really want to go there? Well, whatever you are calling yourself these days, Frosty sneered. She's 50,000. Yes, Faun snapped. I'm over 50,000 years old, far from a child. A 50,000-year-old rookie, Frosty snorts. Oh, this is rich. Oh, you're one to talk, the hominid yells. You and your hench girl / puppy / footstool / sex slave. You leave her out of this, Frosty yelled, causing space-time to warp and blur as her talons reappeared. Why? The great Erectus repeated. What is the deal with her anyway? None of your business. It's always none of my business, the ape man yelled. It's always none of my business, not my concern, something you won't talk about, always. It doesn't matter if it's about your weird obsession with Soul, or about your eternal companion, or your past, or why you suddenly snap online with all your defenses armed when you are in a rest phase, or when you suddenly fall silent when you were laughing moments before, or why you are hurting, and don't you fucking dare tell me you can't feel pain, because you can! The great Erectus moved dangerously close to Frosty. That's why it didn't work out, he said. It wasn't the crazy, or the violence, or the fact that you wanted me to shove a singularity up my ass, and I know that isn't a proper metaphor. It's because no matter how much someone cares about you, or wants to care about you, you keep them a light year away. The great Erectus turned away. No matter how many trillion years they wait, you never trust them. How was I supposed to know what was in that report? He never gave the slightest indication that... Fuck. The great Erectus moved further away. You read it? Frosty asked. Of course I did, the great Erectus replied, not looking at her. Eventually. Not all of it, because... Damn, but I read enough. I am not a child, Faun shouted angrily. I'm over 50,000. Let me go, she shouted as tentacles wrapped around her. Faun, Cuddles said quietly. Why don't we go over here for a bit? As she started to pull her Faun away. I'm not going to let whoever that is call me a child, Faun yelled as Frosty and her mentor were looking into each other's eyes, completely ignoring her. Actually, Cuddles said quietly, you kind of are. What? Faun exclaimed, pushing away from Cuddles. Do you know how old I am? Cuddles asked. I'm a bit over 15 aeons, and I'm still a bit of a newbie. Do you know how long an aeon is? Faun shook her head. It's the lifespan of a universe from the inflation to true heat death, or whatever eventually ends it. It's not really a hard number, but it's thousands of trillions of your winters. Do you know scientific notation? Faun shook her head again as a horrible realization took hold. 1 aeon is so long that the concept of winters doesn't really exist anymore, Cuddles said gently. I've outlived over 15 universes, roughly, and entities like the big guy and Frosty, they still call me kid. I've outlived the stars themselves thousands of times over, and I'm still a newbie. So he thinks of me as a child? Faun asked, her eyes moistening. Cuddles, have you existed for that long? Io transmitted. And these other two are even older? Much older, Io, Cuddles replied. Rumors have it that they are among the oldest. Everyone I know says they were already here. Frosty is an AI with that much runtime. Yes, Cuddles replied. Oh, and of all the entities you might run into, she is one of the last you want to fuck with. The big guy might have mercy on you, but she won't. Neither her nor her apostle. She has a servitor. I don't know about servitor, Cuddles replied, but Flower Child is every bit as scary as Frosty is. Far too powerful to be just a servitor. I've only seen her once, and it was enough. Cuddles shuddered and pulled her tentacles in close. Wow, Io enthused. I should ask her about my project. If it is computers related, Frosty would be the one to ask. She is computing at this level, if she's even computing anymore. He thinks I'm a child? Faun asked quietly, as she looked down at herself. So when you read it, Frosty asked with an odd tone in her voice, what did you think? I wish you fucking told me, instead of hiding it in a goddamn report, the ape man replied. I think I should have read that fucking report a few trillion years before I did. I think... Fuck. I don't even know what to think. He just chuckled. I think that even after all these aeons, I'm still a noob who has no idea what he's doing. You deserved better, Frosty. You did as well, Frosty replied, reaching for his hand. You and me. What the hell were we thinking? I know, right? The hominid snorted as he took her hand. Or did it all go so wrong? A gigantic wall of light covered with rows and columns filled with data appeared behind her. The great Erectus laughed and shook his head. You know what? He said as he sat down, crossed his legs, and patted the non-existent ground beside him. Why not? As Frosty sat down beside him, he turned to look at her and smiled. She smiled back. So, he said, how do you read one of these abominations anyway?